My name is Jacob Beckett. I'm 38 years old, and for the past 15 years, I've been legally dead in the United States. Not because I died, but because someone needed me to disappear. I used to be a son, a brother, a Naval Academy top prospect. But the day I turned down my commission, my family called me a coward. My father said, "Don't bother coming back until you've made something of yourself." My mother deleted my number the same night. My younger brother Nathan got my bedroom, and when I left, no one even asked where I was going. 15 years later, I stepped off a plane at Washington Dulles with nothing but a worn duffel bag and a passport that didn't have my real name on it. There were families holding signs, kids screaming daddy and running toward uniformed parents. A woman burst into tears as her son kissed her forehead. But no one waited for me. No welcome home. Jake. No banner. Not even a message. Just fluorescent lights echoes on polished floors and the soft thud of my boots that no one cared to hear. I took a breath, exhaled slowly, and kept walking. I didn't expect a parade. I didn't even expect kindness. But for a second, I thought maybe someone, just one person, might have remembered me. They didn't. And yet I wasn't surprised. I had vanished on purpose. And when you disappear on purpose, you don't get to expect applause when you come back. But what they didn't know, what they were never supposed to find out, was that I had never stopped serving. I just served in silence in places no one admits exist. And now I was back. Not for a reunion, but for justice. And it was going to begin with silence. The ride from the airport to my childhood home took 45 minutes. Not that anyone came to pick me up. I took the metro, then a bus, then walked the last 4 blocks with my duffel on my shoulder, like some unwanted delivery. The neighborhood looked exactly the same. Perfectly trimmed hedges, mailboxes with little flags, American flags on porches like permanent decorations. But the house I grew up in felt smaller, quieter, colder. I knocked once before letting myself in. The lock hadn't changed, neither had the smell lemons and pine sol. My mom was in the kitchen scrolling her phone. She looked up for half a second, like I was a neighbor stopping by to borrow sugar. "You made it," she said. Flat. No smile, no hug, no welcome. Then she went right back to whatever she was reading. My dad was in the living room polishing one of Nathan's Navy plaques, like it was his own. He glanced at me over his glasses, measured me up like a stranger, then gave a grunt and a nod. That was it. Nathan wasn't home yet. But I could already see the proof of him everywhere, his photos on the wall, his medals in glass, cases, his graduation picture on the mantel where mine used to be. No one asked where I'd been. No one asked why I was back. In this house, questions meant curiosity, and curiosity was dangerous. I stood there for a full minute waiting, hoping maybe someone would say something real. That never came. Finally, my mom said, "You'll sleep in the garage. Nathan's room is a nursery now." She didn't ask if I was staying long, didn't even ask if I was hungry. I dropped my bag by the back door, passed by the hallway. I used to race down barefoot and stepped into the converted garage. Cold floor, old mattress, one folding chair, no pictures, no past. Just 4 walls, the hum of the water heater, and the reminder, this wasn't home anymore. And maybe it never was. The garage smelled like old paint and damp cardboard. There was a single bulb overhead, yellow and flickering like it couldn't decide whether to stay alive. The mattress was thin. Springs poked through. But I'd slept in worse places. Caves, tunnels, the floor of a freighter off the Somali coast. I sat on the edge of the bed and reached into the side pocket of my duffel, pulled out the one thing I'd kept with me all these years, a challenge coin. Matte black. No insignia, no rank, Just wait. Most people don't know this real challenge. Coins from classified units don't have logos, because technically we don't exist. I rubbed my thumb across the coin's edge, and for a moment I was back there again. 15 years ago I stood in a hangar the size of a football field, uniform pressed, boots clean, no name tag, not even a branch insignia. An older man with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen too much handed me the coin without a word. No ceremony, no applause, just the coin and a folder. Inside it was the last version of my name I'd ever see on paper. From this point forward, he said, "You are no longer Jacob Beckett. You are what the mission requires." I remember nodding once. I didn't ask questions. That's what they liked about me. No ego, no hesitation, just follow through. I blinked back in the garage. The coin sat cold in my hand. I'd carried it through 6 continents. It had saved my life twice, once as a weapon, once as a bribe. Now it was just a reminder of who I was and who I wasn't allowed to be. Above me, I could hear muffled laughter from the kitchen. Nathan must have come home. They were probably opening wine, talking about deployments I wasn't allowed to mention, praising him for serving the flag I'd spent 15 years defending in silence. I lay back on the mattress, the coin resting on my chest. I didn't sleep. I listened to the pipes groaning, to the dishwasher humming, to the world moving on without me. And I reminded myself why I came back. Not for them, for the truth. Dinner was served at exactly 6:30. My mother still followed the routine like clockwork: pot roast, green beans, mashed potatoes from a box. Same dishes, same plates with tiny chips on the rim, same silence. Except now, I was the reason for it. We sat around the old oak table like strangers waiting for a train. Dad at the head, Nathan to his right. I was across from the empty seat where my sister used to sit before she moved away and stopped calling. Nathan did most of the talking stories from his last deployment, how his CO was recommending him for early promotion. Dad nodded like he already knew. Mom refilled his water twice before I'd even touched mine. I waited for an opening, just one. Not to take over the conversation, not to impress anyone, just to be part of it. So I said, "You know, I passed through Kandahar once, years ago. It looked different than Nathan cut in. No way, really. They've redone the whole airstrip since then. Totally upgraded." Everyone turned to him. My sentence hung in the air like smoke, then vanished. Nobody asked why I'd been there. Nobody asked when. I took a bite of cold green beans, chewed slowly, swallowed, didn't speak again. A few minutes later, Mom looked up. "Do you need anything for the garage blanket fan?" I shook my head. "I'm good." She smiled politely, then turned to Nathan. "Oh, honey, don't forget to bring your whites to the cleaner tomorrow. Your ceremony's next week." I nodded to myself. That's what tonight was really about. Nathan's promotion. Nathan's future. Me, I was a ghost at their table. No one said it out loud, but it was written on every sideways glance and polite silence. It wasn't anger. It was worse than that. It was indifference. I finished my plate in silence, then stood up, excused myself, and walked back to the garage with the quiet realization that silence doesn't just isolate you, it erases you. Saturday came with perfect weather, blue sky, flags fluttering in the breeze, the kind of day you'd expect for a celebration. Nathan's promotion party was held at the American Legion Hall. Red, white, and blue streamers hung from the rafters. A slideshow played quietly on a loop, photos of him in uniform smiling with his team, saluting at a base somewhere overseas. Every table had a tiny plaque that said, "Congratulations, Lieutenant Beckett." That name used to belong to me. Once. I stood near the back beside the punch bowl, hands in my pockets. No uniform, no name tag, Just a pair of gray slacks and a pressed shirt that didn't quite fit right. Invisible again. The room buzzed with pride. Old vets swapped stories. Family friends clapped Nathan on the back, telling him how proud they were, how much his father must have taught him. He was the golden son. The comeback story. The one who stayed, followed the path, made everyone proud. At one point, a woman I didn't recognize leaned over and asked, "Are you Nathan's friend from the academy?" I shook my head. "I'm his brother." She blinked. "Oh, I didn't realize he had one." She walked away before I could explain. I didn't blame her. No one in this room knew me, and the ones who did acted like they didn't. Dad gave a short speech, talked about honor, duty, legacy. Said Nathan carried on the Beckett name with pride. I stood there sipping warm punch, listening to applause that echoed louder than truth. Not once did anyone ask me what I'd done these past 15 years, where I'd gone, what I'd survived. And maybe that was the point. This was Nathan's day, his name on the cake, his rank on the program, his story being told. Mine wasn't meant to be spoken. Not yet. The room was mid-toast when the door opened. I didn't look right away. Neither did anyone else. But then something shifted. A pause in the air, subtle, electric, like when a storm's about to break and no one can explain why they stopped talking. The door shut quietly behind him. Heavy footsteps followed. Purposeful. Not rushed. I turned my head just enough to see who it was. Miles Salazar. Lieutenant Colonel, now judging by the trim on his dress uniform. Broad-shouldered, impossibly straight posture. Same haunted eyes, though. Same quiet intensity that never left the field. I hadn't seen him in over a decade. Last time we were crawling through a tunnel in northern Syria, blood on our boots, and comms jammed, dragging a wounded teammate out by the straps of her vest. Now he stood in the middle of a party surrounded by flags and hors d'oeuvres. He scanned the room like he was still clearing a zone, eyes moving slow, calculating. Then he saw me. He froze, just for a beat. Then something flickered behind his expression. Recognition. Respect. He adjusted his cap, stepped forward through the crowd who had now noticed him, and came to a stop 3 feet in front of me. Then, he saluted. A full, precise, formal salute. The kind you don't give lightly. The kind they teach you only to give to someone whose authority is undeniable. "Commander Beckett," he said. Loud enough for the room to hear. Sharp enough to cut through the cake-cutting and champagne fizz. Time stopped. A fork clattered against a plate. Someone whispered. Commander Nathan stiffened across the room, confusion etched across his face. My mother's smile fell flat. My father blinked twice. I didn't move, didn't return the salute, didn't smile. Just gave him a subtle nod. The kind of nod two people give each other when they've been in a place no one else would believe exists. Salazar lowered his hand and stepped back. Then, like nothing had happened, he made his way to the refreshments table. The buzz in the room shifted. People whispered, looked my way. Some glanced at Nathan, unsure what they were seeing anymore. But me, I stood still. Let the moment hang. Let it speak for itself. Because sometimes, you don't need to explain who you are. Sometimes, all it takes is one man saluting you by name. The sound of that salute didn't echo. It landed hard final like a gavel hitting a bench. For a full 10 seconds, no one spoke. No clapping. No coughing. Just silence. A wine glass slipped from someone's hand and shattered against the hardwood floor. The fragments scattered across the tiles like the truth had just been broken open. My mother's phone slid off her lap and hit the ground with a soft thud. She didn't pick it up. My father's jaw tensed. He stared at me like I was a stranger, one he couldn't place but couldn't ignore. Nathan looked from me to Salazar and back again, searching for answers, in faces that weren't offering any. And me, I didn't flinch, didn't explain, didn't shrink, just held my posture, kept my gaze steady. Then gave the smallest nod you can give without making it seem like a performance. It wasn't for them, it was for him. For Salazar. And maybe, just maybe, for the ghosts that had walked beside me in places no one here could pronounce. No one said another word. Not about it anyway. The party limped forward after that, but something had shifted. The narrative had cracked. And though no one would say it out loud, every person in that room was now asking the same question. Who the hell is Jacob Beckett? They'd get their answer, eventually. But not from my mouth. Not yet. Most people think the military has a record of everything. Names, ranks, missions. They believe there's always a paper trail, a file, a log. They're wrong. Some units don't exist. Not officially, not legally. Not even behind a classified clearance wall. I was 23 when they found me. It started with a psych eval I never remembered taking. Then came a meeting, unmarked room, 3 men in civilian clothes, all with the kind of posture that said career military without a uniform. They didn't ask if I wanted in. They told me I already was. They called it Dagger Unit 17. No branch, no patch. No chain of command, at least not one you could follow. We were recruited for one purpose: insertion, without detection extraction, without trace resolution, without recognition. We were the people they sent in when every other option had failed, or when the government couldn't admit it was involved at all. There were 8 of us at first. By the end of the first year, only 6 remained. Training wasn't just brutal. It was designed to break everything soft in you. Not just your muscles, your memories, your ego, your need to belong. Once inside Dagger, you didn't just cut ties. You burned the bridge, the land beneath it, and then forgot the fire ever existed. My name was wiped from active duty roles. Even my Naval Academy records were sealed. Officially, I never commissioned, never served. To the world, including my family, I was a dropout, a waste, a story you told over dinner to explain why some people just couldn't hack it. But behind locked doors and encrypted networks, I was a ghost in uniform. And ghosts don't get graves. We get assignments. They called it Phantom River. The name didn't mean anything. It was just a placeholder, something nondescript enough to slip through files unnoticed. We were sent into northern Syria under complete blackout. No support. No extraction plan. No backup unless someone in DC grew a conscience. Our objective: locate and extract an American intelligence asset, an economist who'd been kidnapped by a militant cell bankrolling terror attacks across 3 continents. He wasn't a soldier, just a man with a laptop and access to money laundering networks that made real bombs possible. We parachuted in under moonlight, landed 3 clicks outside a ghost town near the Turkish border. 12 hours later, we had the target. That was the easy part. On the exfil route, we were compromised. Intel was off, way off. What was supposed to be a small patrol turned out to be a well-armed force with drone surveillance and local sympathizers. They cut off every exit. We retreated to the only cover we could find: an abandoned elementary school with crumbling walls and no roof. It was supposed to be a 2-day mission. We were there for 12. 12 days of dust-heat gunfire and static-filled comms. 12 days of rationing ammo, patching wounds with duct tape and gauze, and carrying a man who barely spoke English, but somehow knew he was our responsibility. We held that schoolhouse like it was the last fortress on Earth. Every night they tried something new: mortars, flanking routes, starvation tactics. Every night we repelled them. Day 7, one of ours, Mendez, took a round to the shoulder. Day 9, our drone feed went down completely. Day 10, a local police unit promised safe passage and turned on us 30 minutes later. They took our comms tech hostage. Her name was Lena, 26, grew up in San Diego, quiet until she spoke Arabic like a native. We broke protocol to get her back. Stormed a farmhouse in the dead of night 3 clicks off-grid. No clearance, no orders. Just us. And rage. We got her. We lost 2 on the way out. And still, no one came. No evac. No air support. Just a message on day 11. Hold position. Situation under review. So we held. On day 12, we finally made it out. Hijacked a supply truck. Fought through a checkpoint. Crossed the border with fake IDs and blood-stained uniforms. We delivered the target. We delivered the data. That intel stopped 3 major bombings across Europe. That part they'll admit in a footnote. The rest, how we survived what we risked, who we lost, that never made it into the report. Phantom River was listed as a success, but only on paper. To us, it was something else. It was the moment we realized we weren't just ghosts. We were expendable. By design. Day 8. We were low on water, down to 3 full magazines per person, and running evac scenarios that all ended in the same way, dead or captured. That's when the order came in. Encrypted, brief. Just 4 words. Abort. Do not engage. The transmission came from Sergeant Luis Varga, our mission liaison back at CENTCOM. He wasn't on the ground. He never had been. He was the type who wore polished boots to briefings and spoke in acronyms so no one could challenge him directly. Varga's directive was simple: abandon the target scatter and make your way out if possible. We were being erased in real time. Because if we failed, it wouldn't exist. And if we succeeded, it'd be inconvenient. I read the message 3 times, then deleted it. I didn't tell the team. I told them we were greenlit for extraction in 24 hours, and we just needed to hold position until then. That was a lie, but it kept them steady. It kept them alive. We stayed. We fought. We survived. And we got everyone out target team intel, even Lena, who should have died from blood loss, but didn't because our medic refused to stop stitching with trembling hands. 2 weeks later, back on U.S. soil, I was pulled into a windowless room. Varga was there. So were 2 men I'd never seen before. He smiled like it pained him. Said I had disobeyed a direct order. Said I had compromised mission integrity. I told him I followed the only order that mattered. No one gets left behind. He didn't respond, just slid a folder across the table. Inside an agreement, voluntary discharge, honorable but final. With one condition: no mention of Dagger Unit 17, Phantom River, or anything that came after. I signed it, because the alternative was worse. And just like that, I was gone. Stripped of my name, stripped of my record, but not of my memory, and not of the truth. They didn't just discharge me, they erased me. It started with the personnel database. My name disappeared from active duty rosters. No record of deployment, no medals, no ribbons, no rank. As far as the Navy was concerned, I had never commissioned, never served, never existed. The email address linked to my military profile returned a 404. My access badges stopped working overnight. The bank account that held my combat pay was closed, zeroed out, transferred somewhere I'd never track. And just like that, 15 years of my life were swallowed by red tape and blank files. My family received no notice, no phone call, no explanation. They'd already thought I quit the Navy years ago, dropped out, walked away. Now there was nothing to prove otherwise. I wasn't even allowed to keep my uniform. They let me leave with 2 things: a duffel bag of civilian clothes and a black coin that no one would recognize unless they'd stood in the same place as I had. That coin became my anchor. Every time I questioned whether I was losing my mind, Whether any of it had actually happened, I'd take it out, feel its weight, and remember who I used to be. I kept it in my pocket when I washed dishes in a diner under a fake name. I clutched it in hotel rooms when I woke from dreams that weren't dreams, and I gripped it every time I saw a headline about some terrorist attack that almost happened, because I knew exactly why it didn't. They could delete my name, they could seal my records, they could make me disappear, but they couldn't change what I'd done, or who I'd done it for. Some nights the silence was louder than gunfire, not outside, inside. I'd lie awake, staring at cracked ceilings in rooms I didn't belong to, wondering if no one knows what you've done. Does it still matter? Was it really service? If there's no medal, no salute, no name on a wall, did the lives we saved count? If the people we saved never knew, the world saw me as a dropout, a runaway, a man who couldn't handle the pressure. But I never quit. I never failed. I followed orders until the day I couldn't, until doing the right thing meant breaking the rules designed to protect people like Varga, not people like us. Maybe I'd never have a record. Maybe no one would tell my story. But I knew the truth, and the coin in my pocket wasn't just a reminder of what I lost. It was proof that I was never the failure they said I was. Just forgotten, on purpose. It started with a beep, not the kind you hear on phones or microwaves. This one came from a device I hadn't touched in years, an encrypted pager, no bigger than a deck of cards, hidden beneath a false bottom in my duffel bag. I hadn't heard it since Baghdad, since the night Ramirez went dark. The screen blinked once, then showed a string of numbers, old protocols, location pings. Then one message: unauthorized access. Storm protocol breached. Storm protocol. The operation had a dozen names over the years. Phantom River was just the surface one. Storm was the real file. The deep one. The version that included how we survived, who gave the wrong orders, what got buried. That file was locked behind triple-tier encryption and geo-fenced to prevent internal leaks. If it got accessed even for a second, the system would ping every operative connected to the original mission, which meant someone had tripped it. I ran the trace off an old satellite tether I still had access to. It took 60 seconds to narrow down. The IP address didn't belong to the government. It belonged to a military base in Virginia, Navy side, non-classified terminal. Then the host name loaded. Nathan Beckett, personal. I stared at the screen, not in anger, not in panic, just stillness. He had no idea what he'd just touched. No idea that by clicking open one wrong file, just one, he'd triggered a domino effect tied to something the Department of Defense had spent 15 years burying. And now that the system had flagged the breach, others would know too. People like Varga. People who didn't like loose ends. People who made ghosts for a living. I put the pager down, and for the first time since I came home, I knew why I was really back. Not for a salute, not for closure, but to make sure the next casualty didn't carry my last name. She found me the next day. I was sitting alone on a park bench a few blocks from the house, nursing a black coffee that had gone cold 30 minutes earlier. No uniform, no badge. Just a woman in civilian clothes, and a calm, deliberate way of walking like she'd already decided how the conversation would end. She sat beside me without asking. "Jacob Beckett," she said. Not a question. I didn't answer, didn't look at her. She handed me a manila envelope. No markings, no seal, just thick paper that made a soft thump when it landed on my lap. Inside, satellite photos, redacted mission logs, and a photocopy of a medical ID bracelet. I stared at the bracelet for a long time. "Your father was the target," I finally said. She nodded. "Dr. Wei Lin, Department of Energy consultant. He was working on counter-finance models when they grabbed him." I remembered the mission. how he had refused to leave without his notes, how he thanked us with a look, not words too scared to speak, too smart not to understand. I always wondered what happened to him, I said. He made it out, got reassigned, never talked about it. Rachel paused. He died 2 years ago. Cancer. I finally looked at her. She wasn't just another investigator. She knew. Not everything, but enough to start pulling at the thread. Why now, I asked. She shrugged, but it wasn't casual. I was cleared for an internal research program last year. Special access. Storm Protocol was buried under 5 layers of misfiled data, intentionally. The more I dug, the more gaps I found. And you think bringing this out will make a difference? She turned to me. It already has. The breach has them nervous. They want to shut it all down for good. Rewrite the story. Burn the pieces. I looked down at the bracelet again. You could get yourself buried chasing this. She didn't flinch. I'm not chasing it alone. Silence hung between us for a moment. A different kind of silence. Not empty. Waiting. You want my help, I asked. No, she said. I want your truth. That stopped me. No one had asked me for that in 15 years. Not even myself. I closed the envelope, stood up, and said the only thing that mattered. Meet me tomorrow. You'll get it. That night I got a call from an unknown number. I didn't answer, never do. But whoever it was left a voicemail. No name. Just one sentence spoken with that same smug calm I hadn't heard since the debrief room 15 years ago. Some things are buried for a reason, Commander. Varga. I should have known he'd move fast. By morning, Rachel texted my credentials were frozen. I've been locked out of the system. They weren't just containing the leak. They were preparing the cleanup. I pulled up the news later that day. Varga was listed as a senior advisor to the Office of Defense Oversight. Public-facing. Medals. Smiles. Carefully worded interviews about transparency and restoring public trust. He was good. Still playing the long game, and still silencing the people who got in the way. I remembered the folder he slid across the table after Phantom River. The fake discharge. The threat behind his smile. Now he wanted to finish what he started. Erase Storm Protocol. Discredit anyone who touched it. And if necessary, destroy lives to protect his version of the truth. For years I thought silence was survival. Keep my head down, stay off grid, let the ghosts rest. But ghosts don't rest when their stories are rewritten. Varga had already buried the dead. Now he was coming for the living. And I knew then, clearer than I'd ever known anything, this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about all of us who never got a name, never got a grave, never got to speak. If I stayed silent now, he'd win. Again. And this time, there wouldn't be a coin left to prove we ever existed. I didn't decide right away. I sat with it, let it breathe, walked the old neighborhood, visited the baseball field where Nathan and I used to play catch before everything got complicated. I ran through every outcome in my head. How exposing the truth could destroy what little peace I had. How Varga could retaliate. How the government might discredit me again. And then there was the other possibility. That no one would care. That after all this, after years of silence, survival, and sacrifice, the truth would land in front of people who'd shrug and say, "So what? I'd lived too long in the shadows to chase validation." I wasn't looking for applause. I just didn't want to waste what was left of my name on a fight I couldn't win. But then Nathan knocked on the door of the garage. He stood there awkwardly like he wasn't sure whether to come in or salute. I found something he said, on a restricted drive. It locked me out, but it had your name. Or it looked like your name. JB Commander. Syria. And a list of dead operatives. One of them matched that coin you carry. My heart didn't race. It went quiet. He looked me in the eye. I thought you left us, that you gave up. But now I think, maybe they didn't let you come back. He didn't ask for the whole story. He didn't press. He just said, whatever this is, I think you should tell it. Then he left. That was the moment. Not Rachel. Not Salazar. Not Varga's threats. Nathan. Because for the first time, my brother wasn't looking at me like the family failure. He was looking at me like someone who still mattered. Someone who'd been misjudged. Someone who had a choice. So I made it. I called Rachel, told her to prepare everything, documents, footage, names. I'm going to testify, I said. For the people who can't. And for the ones they're about to silence next. I ended the call, put the coin in my pocket, and packed the only suit I still owned. If they wanted to erase me again, they'd have to do it in front of the whole damn country. The next 72 hours felt like preparing for war, just a different kind of battlefield. Rachel set up a secure ops room in a borrowed basement office beneath an old bookstore in Arlington. No windows, concrete walls, one exit. It felt familiar. Salazar flew in the next morning. He walked in with a hard case full of encrypted drives and a folder labeled Personnel KIA Unrecognized. He didn't say hello, just handed me the drive and said, "This is everything they tried to bury. Helmet cam footage, internal comm logs, time-stamped GPS records that showed our exact location during Phantom River, and most damning of all, audio files from Varga's override transmissions. He had told us to abort. We didn't, and we survived anyway." Rachel laid it all out across the wall, each piece of evidence printed, tagged, mapped. "This isn't just a testimony," she said. "It's a timeline. If they can challenge your memory, they'll try. But they can't challenge this." I stared at one grainy still from the helmet cam, Lena bloodied, blinking in the back of the truck as we made our escape. She wasn't supposed to make it. She had. Salazar pointed to a blurred figure in the foreground. "That's you," dragging her in. I didn't remember being filmed. Didn't care. But now it mattered. Proof didn't just protect me. It protected the dead. The erased. The forgotten. Nathan came by the second night, brought sandwiches, and didn't say much. But he stayed. Watched the footage. Asked questions. At one point, he looked over and said, "You weren't just gone. You were doing this while we were calling you a coward." I didn't respond. Didn't need to. By the end of day 3, we had a case file thick enough to bury Varga's career twice over. Rachel filed the formal request for a closed-door congressional hearing. The date came in within the hour. It was sooner than we expected. They wanted this over quickly. But that was fine, because for the first time in 15 years, I wasn't preparing to disappear. I was preparing to be seen. The hearing room smelled like cold air and politics. You could feel it, the kind of space designed not for truth, but for containment. Everything was beige, the walls, the carpet, the faces of the men behind the long table. 3 senators, 2 military liaisons, 1 Department of Defense legal rep. They weren't expecting much, just another administrative formality, another breach to sweep under the rug, chalk up to technical error, and move on. They expected Rachel to show up alone. Maybe a file, maybe a statement. What they didn't expect was me. I walked in wearing my original dress uniform. No medals, no nameplate. Just the insignia of a rank they never officially acknowledged commander. For a second, no one recognized me. Then the DoD rep, Colonel Briggs, squinted, leaned forward, and I saw it hit him. He remembered. But he didn't speak. Neither did I. Rachel took her seat beside me. Salazar stood by the door like he was still guarding an entry point. The committee chair, Senator Halverson, cleared his throat. "We're here today to review a recent breach of classified files related to a decommissioned operation. This proceeding is closed and off record, unless voted otherwise." He didn't look at me. Didn't want to. Rachel leaned in, microphone on. We request that the committee hear direct testimony from a witness with operational knowledge of the incident in question. Halverson raised an eyebrow. And who might that be? I adjusted the mic, sat straight, looked each of them in the eye. Commander Jacob Beckett, formerly of Dagger Unit 17. The silence that followed wasn't shock. It was strategy. They were deciding in real time whether to shut me down, delay the hearing, or pretend they didn't know what that name meant. But Rachel was ready. She slid a document across the table, confirmation of my legal right to testify. After a long pause, Halverson nodded stiffly. Proceed. So I did. 15 years late. But right on time. I didn't tell them a story. I gave them facts, dates, coordinates, timelines. I started with the mission brief, how Dagger Unit 17 was formed from 8 personnel across 4 branches, scrubbed from all official records, bound by non-disclosure protocols, so severe we couldn't even write in journals. I explained how we parachuted into northern Syria under total blackout, tasked with retrieving a civilian asset whose intel could cripple the financial backbone of 3 major terror networks. I didn't embellish, didn't dramatize. I described the terrain, how the air choked with dust during the day and froze your breath at night. I listed each engagement 12 confirmed firefights, 5 ambush attempts, 2 betrayals by local intermediaries. I said Mendez was shot on day 7, that we had no morphine, so he bit down on a piece of Kevlar while Lena stitched him up, that he didn't cry out once. I said Lena was taken by a fake police convoy, and that we broke every rule in the manual to get her back. I didn't ask for pity. When they questioned our chain of command, I gave them the override code Varga used to issue the abort directive. When they asked why I disobeyed, I gave them the rules of engagement we were supposed to follow. When they asked why we stayed, I said, because leaving would have been cowardice, and that's not what we were trained for. Senator Halverson leaned forward. You understand, Commander, that none of this is corroborated by the official record. I nodded. I understand. That's why I brought my own. Rachel activated the video. Helmet cam footage. Dust. Gunfire. Lena screaming in Arabic. Me pulling her into the truck. The economist whispering thank you in the back seat with blood on his hands. I didn't watch the screen. I'd seen it enough. I watched them. Their faces. Their silence. And I realized something. They weren't horrified. They were inconvenienced. The truth didn't scare them. But acknowledging it would cost them control. So I ended with this. You don't have to call me a hero. I'm not asking for medals. But you will not rewrite this. Not while I'm still breathing. No one spoke for a full minute. And in that silence, I felt something shift. Not victory. Not yet. But ground. Solid beneath my feet. For the first time in 15 years. The video ended. Static. Black screen. One last frame frozen me blood on my face, hauling Lena across rubble eyes locked on the camera without knowing it was even there. No music, no narration, just truth. Raw and unfinished. Rachel leaned into her mic. We've submitted time-stamped data radio logs and authenticated GPS records to the committee. All corroborated, all suppressed. She slid over a final packet of documents. Additionally, we've included internal correspondence from Sergeant Luis Varga emails recommending the deletion of Phantom River materials from Central Archives, citing political risk outweighing operational merit. That was the paper trail, the part they couldn't erase. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. The committee chair looked unmoved, cold, calculating. This is compelling, but we're still missing verification from active service members, he said. You're asking us to trust evidence that's been sealed for over a decade. That's when the door opened. Nathan stepped in. Full dress whites, polished shoes, clean shave. He walked past the cameras, past Rachel, and stood beside me, straight-backed, jaw clenched. "My name is Lieutenant Nathan Beckett, U.S. Navy," he said into the mic. I accessed a restricted file by accident. I triggered this hearing without knowing the consequences. But once I saw what was in it, I couldn't look away. He turned to the committee. My brother didn't fail. He didn't run. He served in a way most of us will never understand. I stand as a witness, not to what he's saying, but to what he lived through in silence while we called him a disappointment. He paused. I believed the official version. I was wrong. The room was still. No senator interrupted. No aide whispered. Rachel stood one last time. "For the record, the Department of Defense has not denied the existence of Dagger Unit 17. They simply never acknowledged it. There is no official contradiction, only silence, and silence in this case has become complicity." She placed the final copy of the footage on the record table. Halverson leaned back. He didn't smile, didn't frown. He just said, "We'll deliberate." But we knew by then the walls had already cracked. Not because of the footage, not because of the files, because someone finally said it out loud. And it came from his own brother. The night after the hearing, the house was quiet. Not awkward, not heavy, just still. Dinner was simple grilled chicken, canned corn, store-bought rolls. No one said much. Nathan passed me the salt like we'd done it 100 times. My mom didn't check her phone once. And my dad, well, he didn't look at me, not right away. After the dishes were cleared, I stepped out onto the back porch. The sky was dark stars barely visible behind a film of cloud. Crickets hummed. A neighbor's dog barked 2 houses down. Then the screen door creaked open. Dad walked out holding 2 bottles of beer. He set one down on the railing next to me. Didn't hand it to me, just placed it there, like he didn't want to make a thing out of it. He stood beside me for a long minute, both of us facing the same dark lawn. Then finally, without turning his head, he said, "You always had your mother's stubbornness, but the fight in you, that's mine." Another beat of silence. I should have asked, should have tried. I didn't answer, didn't need to. He raised his bottle just slightly. I did the same. And in that quiet clink of glass, there was something we'd never had before. Not forgiveness, not even closure, just recognition. And maybe respect. Some names were never meant to be remembered. Some missions were never meant to be known. But that doesn't mean they didn't matter. Lena, Mendez, Ramirez. The 6 of us who walked into that broken schoolhouse and refused to die there. They're not in textbooks. No statues. No medals handed to their parents at a Pentagon podium. But I remember. I remember every step. Every breath we didn't think we'd get to take. Every decision made in the dark with no guarantee anyone would ever know what we chose. And maybe that's the point. Service isn't always about ceremony. Sometimes it's about sacrifice with no spotlight. Doing the right thing even when no one will ever say thank you. For 15 years I thought silence was a punishment. But now, I see it differently. It was space. Space to figure out who I was without the noise, without the need to explain. Now the truth's out. The record is set. The ghosts can rest. And me, I'm not looking for redemption. I'm not chasing honor. I already earned it in the dirt and the fire, in the silence. Some victories don't need applause. They just need to be witnessed,